Welcome to today's lecture on order of operations using fractions. I'm Drew Collop. In today's lecture, we're going to take all the concepts we've learned earlier, we're going to combine them all together and do BEDMAS on it. As a reminder, BEDMAS is an acronym to explain the order in which you do your math. It starts with a B. We always start with what's inside the brackets. Once that's complete, we do exponents. After that, please remember that division and multiplication is a grouping. Just because D comes before M in the word BEDMAS does not necessarily mean you do division always first. You read the problem from left to right, and whatever comes first, let it be multiplication or division, you do that one first. After that, addition and subtraction is also a grouping. Once again, just because A comes before S in the word BEDMAS does not necessarily mean you always do addition before subtraction. You read the problem from left to right. Whichever comes first, whether it be addition or subtraction, do that. Then continue reading from left to right and do the next one. Let's give this one a try. There are many fractions here. We have exponents, we have brackets, we have addition, we have subtraction. And they are unlike fractions, which means we will require to find a common denominator. I would encourage you, when you're trying these big problems, to write the word BEDMAS down to try and help you follow the order of operations. What is the first thing we do? We do B. B for bracket. Please note, this is not correct. Why? These are two separate terms. Why are they? Because they're separated by a subtraction symbol. So you cannot simply just distribute the squared to all the values inside. Why? Because they are two separate terms. Terms are separated by addition or subtraction signs. If it was one term, all multiplication or division, then you may distribute. So please don't do that. Let's start with the brackets. We have to start with that first. Equal sign, 4 over 5 minus. In this case here, we have our brackets. Our exponents are on the outside, plus 7 over 10. Now, if we want to subtract these values, what do we have to do first? We have to find a common denominator. They are unlike fractions. What's the lowest common denominator? Between 2 and 3, it's going to be 6. Times 3 times 3 times 2 times 2. Please note, if you mean this, don't write this. That does not mean the same thing. That's what that means. Do you see this? This is a 1. If I multiply anything by 1, does the value change? It does not. This is not 1. This is 2. So please note, make sure you show me it's multiplying both the top and the bottom number, both the numerator and the denominator. Don't just write me one number. I will understand that's what you mean, but that's not what you wrote. Communication is very important. Let's do the math now. 3 over 6 minus 2 over 6. Now we have common denominators. So now we can perform our subtraction. 4 over 5 minus, in this case here, we're subtracting. When we're subtracting fractions, we find a common denominator and the denominator does not change. What we do is we look at the numerators and we apply that math. 3 minus 2 is 1. 1 divided by 6, we can't simplify that any further. Now we can distribute the 2. Why? Because it is one term. It is not separated by an addition or subtraction sign. So this becomes we then perform our exponents here. 1 squared is 1. 6 squared is 36. And that's where we're at right now. Once again, you can see we have unlike denominators. We must find a common denominator. We're going to try and find the lowest common denominator. To do that, let's do some prime factorization. We're going to break down 5, 10, and 36. 5 is a prime number. 10 is 5 times 2. And 36, what's 36? 36 is 4 times 9, right? So we have a 2 in there. That'll be 2 times 18. Well, I could write 18, but that would be inappropriate. Instead, I need to break it down to its prime numbers. So 18 is going to be 2 times 3 times 3. 2 times 2 is 4 times 3 is 12 times 3 is 36. Now that I have them broken down into its prime numbers, I bring down anything that's not a repeat, and I multiply those together. And what do we get here now? 180. 5 times 2 is 10. 10 times 6 is going to be 60. Times 3 is 180. 10, 6 times 3. 180. So now I want to turn all of these fractions here into 180. How do we do that? Let's multiply the 10 by 18. Let's multiply the 5 by 36. And let's multiply the 36 by 5. Please show me that step on any assessments. Next up, 4 times 36, 144 over 180. Subtract now. 5 times 1 is 5 over 180. Plus 7 times 18 is 126 over 180. Now we have common denominators. So what do? We look at the numerators and we apply the math to the numerators. The denominator does not change. Again, you don't have to show me this step, but I'm going to write it down nonetheless so you can see exactly what I'm doing. We then combine those. 144 minus 5 is 139, plus 126 is 265 over 180. This is an improper fraction. Let's convert it to a mixed number. Can we simplify it first? Yes, we can. I can see we can pull a 5 out of the top and the bottom. When I take 5 out of 180, I get 36. 265 divided by 5, it's going to be 53. Now, let's convert this improper fraction into a mixed number. How many times does 36 go into 53? Goes in one time. 36, what do we got left? 17. We have 1 and 36 over 17. Final answer. So you can see here, there's a lot of steps along the way. We had to understand how to use BEDMAS. We had to understand how to get a common denominator, how to subtract fractions, how to distribute an exponent, how to get a common denominator, how to simplify fractions, and how to convert from an improper fraction to a mixed number. All of these skills are necessary to do this one problem. In the question here, you can see these were all proper fractions. What if we have mixed numbers? Let's try the next one. As you can see, we have mixed numbers, we have whole numbers, we have a proper fraction. The first thing you want to do is convert all of your mixed numbers into improper fractions. 1 times 8 plus 7 over 8 plus, in this case, we'll turn the whole number into a fraction by putting it over 1. 4 times 4 plus 1 over 4 minus 3 over 16. Step 1 done. 8 times 1 is 8 plus 7 is 15. 16 plus 1 . Now, be careful here. I've seen many a student, for some reason, they add brackets in when they don't exist. So there are no brackets here, notice that. But many times I see students add brackets in. And they add up the one side and they subtract the other side, then they multiply them together. Please note, don't add anything in that isn't there. There are no brackets. Don't add them in. Following the rules of BEDMAS, what do we have to do first? We have to do multiplication before we do addition or subtraction. Can we simplify? Yes, we can. I have a 2 here and I have a 4 there. I can take a 2 out of the top and the bottom. This then becomes 15 over 8 plus 17 over 2 minus 3 over 16. Now you can see we have 3 fractions and they don't have a common denominator. Let's do prime factorization to determine the lowest common denominator. Hopefully you could see it was 16 before I even did this, but I want to make sure we're doing as many examples as possible for those students who are struggling. So 16 is the lowest common denominator. Times 2, times 2, times 8, times 8. Now we have common denominators in all three of those fractions. Let's combine these together. Common denominator 16 stays the same. Then we follow the rules of Bedmas. What we do next is we read the problem from left to right and we do whatever comes first, whether it be addition or subtraction. Addition is first, and then we do subtraction. Please do them in that order. 30 plus 136, 166, minus 3 over 16 equals 163 over 16. How many times does 16 go into 163? Well, hopefully you can do this without doing all the long division. 10 times 16 is 160. So this is going to be 10 and 3 over 16. Can I simplify that down? I cannot. Final answer. So hopefully you can appreciate all the effort we went to in those initial lectures to try and build up those key skills, because you see you need them all right now. And moving forward, we're going to build on that. You need to do all these concepts to learn any additional mathematics. Let's do another problem together. Here we have mixed numbers, we have proper fractions, we have addition, we have subtraction, we have division. Okay, so there's a lot of steps along the way. Remember to always follow Bedmas. Let's write that down. And that's a grouping, and that's a grouping. First things first, I have mixed numbers. Let's turn them into improper fractions first. Keep the brackets there. Step 1 done. Let's combine them together. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 3 is 15. Minus. Please note that this minus sign is out there. Don't do minus 6 plus 5. That would be incorrect. I'm doing 6 plus 5. That's 11 over 6, and it's subtracting that. Keep your brackets around that for now. 4 times 8 is 32, plus 7 is 39. I haven't done any mathematical operations yet. All I've done is convert those mixed numbers into improper fractions. Now we have to follow Bedmas. What do we do first? We do what's in the brackets first. So we're going to do this, and then we'll do this. To do the first one here, 4 and 6, we need to find a common denominator. The lowest common denominator between 4 and 6 is going to be 12. Multiply the bottom by 3 and the top by 3. Multiply the bottom by 2, multiply the top by 2. 45 over 12 minus 22 over 12. Common denominator. Now we add to that. Here we're dividing fractions, so we take the fraction that comes after the division symbol, we flip it, take the reciprocal, and we multiply it. Next step, we're still on the brackets part now. Let's combine these together. 45 minus 22 is going to be 23 over 12. Here, we now have to multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators. There is no way to simplify those by canceling terms out. So we will probably need a calculator for the first one. 237 over 40. Now we don't need these brackets anymore, so we can actually remove these because we don't require them. We are going to combine those fractions together. Lowest common denominator between 12 and 40. Let's do prime factorization. 2 times 2 times 3. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 10, but 10 is not a prime number. So we must break that down into 2 times 5. We then bring down our columns of numbers and we multiply them together. 2 times 2 is 4, times 3 is 12, times 10 is going to be 120. Lowest common denominator between 12 and 40 is 120. Multiply this by 10, multiply this by 3. 230 over 120 plus 3 times 273 is 819. Add those together now. And this is equal to 1049 over 120. How many times does 120 go into 1049? Let's do some long division on that one. I'm going to guess 8. 8 times 0, 8 times 2 is 16. Carry the 1. That's going to be 9. 9. Bring that over. 89. So here we get a whole number is 8. Denominator remains the same. And the remainder here is what's left over. Can we simplify that down at all? We cannot. That is now the final answer. Once again, you can see many, many steps here to achieve that final answer. If you lack understanding in any one of those steps, you will not be able to solve this. Once again, please make sure you master all these skills before we move on to the higher order math. We've done a number of problems together. It's time for you to practice. We have lots of practice problems here. C, D, E, F. So pause your video, answer all these problems, then come back, and I'll take up some of them, not all of them. There's all your answers. Let's take up a couple of them. I'm going to skip past A. I'm going to do B with you. First things first, remember BEDMAS. Do not do this, as I will remind you again. Why? Because those are two separate terms. We cannot distribute an exponent if it's more than one term inside the bracket, so don't do that. First things first, let's convert everything from mixed numbers to improper fractions. Make sure you copy it down correctly. You can see there I copied down a squared instead of a cube. If I can make that mistake, so can you. Always double check. Now that we have everything converted to improper fractions away from mixed numbers, let's see what we can do here. Brackets first. Here we have two fractions inside the brackets. We're subtracting them. We need to get a common denominator. Multiply that side by 2. Now you might want to multiply these together, but I would encourage you to not skip steps, to just follow the rules of BEDMAS, do an extra step along the way. That way you don't make mistakes, jumping ahead. Let's combine those together. You can see we have a common denominator. So what do? We apply the math to the numerators. 11 minus 6 is 5. Now that we're done our brackets, let's distribute. Now we can distribute the cube to both those values there. Five cubed, 5 times 5 is 25. 25 times 5 is 125. 4 cubed, 4 times 4 is 16. 16 times 4, 64. Now we are done our brackets, we're done our exponents. Now we do multiplication. We're multiplying those together. Can we simplify that down at all? We cannot. multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators. 19 times 7, 4 times 3. Now we have two fractions that need a common denominator. What's the lowest common denominator between 12 and 64? Prime factorization. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. Now hopefully you see that all of that 64, so 64 times 3 is going to be 192. 192 is the lowest common multiple between 64 and 12. Multiply that by 3. Multiply this one by 16. 125 times 3 is 375. Common denominator is going to be 192. Add to that 133 times 16. You're going to need a calculator for that over a denominator of 192. Now that we have common denominators, we combine the numerators. 375 plus 2128 over 192. And here we'll get 2503 over 192. Now we have to break this down into a mixed number. How do we do that? We can do long division. You could use your calculator. Let's do long division. How many times does 192 go into 250? Goes in one time. How many times does 192 go into 583? Let's say 3 times. 3 times 6. 3 times 9 is 27. Carry the 2. 3 times 1 plus 2 is 5. So here we have 13 wholes. Denominator stays the same. 7 on top. Final answer. That was a big one. All of that just to solve that problem. Again, you have to understand many different steps here to get the correct answer. Let's do C together. C is not such a challenging one if you know what to do. Bad miss. Division, multiplication happens before addition, subtraction. When we read the problem from left to right, we do whatever one comes first, whether it be division or multiplication. Multiplication comes first, so we do that. Can we simplify this down? We can. We can take a 2 out of there. We can take a 2 out of there. Multiply the numerators. Multiply the denominators. Here we get 2 over 5. Subtract 2 over 5 divided by 7 over 10. Now be careful with this. I know what you're thinking is going to happen. Oh, this is easy, sir. I can just take those, and that gives me 0 divided by 7 over 10, and that's equal to 0. Wrong. Why can't we do that? Because it violates Bedmas. Make sure you're following the rules of Bedmas. What do we do before subtraction? Now we can do division. Remember what happens? We take the number that comes afterwards, we flip it, and we multiply it. Can we simplify this down? We can. I can take 1 5 out of here. I can take 2 5s out of there. Multiply my numerators. Multiply my denominators. 2 times 2 is 4, and 1 times 7 is 7. Now I have to find the lowest common denominator between 5 and 7. Hopefully you can see that's going to be 35. Multiply one side by 5 and the other side by 7. Now that we have common denominators, we can just subtract the 2. We have 14 minus 20. It's going to be minus 6. Can we simplify that down anymore? We cannot. That is now the final answer. Some more problems here. This one here, make sure you do your division, then your multiplication, then add them together. This one here, remember what that means? That means multiply together, even though it's brackets. So I do division first, then multiply, then subtract. Those are all the ones I'm going to take up in this lecture. If you have any additional questions about the ones I didn't take up, feel free to contact me outside of class or ask me during tutorial. Now we're on to our final concept dealing with fractions. complex fractions. What is a complex fraction? It's when the numerator, denominator, or both contain fractions. So it's a fraction within a fraction. They're not that difficult to solve. What you do, number one, combine the fractions in the numerator. Then combine the fractions in the denominator. Then divide the bottom from the top. Flip, multiply, solve, simplify. This is not that big a challenge. Let's work through number 12 together. You can see here we have fractions within a fraction. No big deal. We'll deal with the numerator first. Lowest common denominator between 3 and 4 is going to be 12. On the bottom here, turn that into a whole number. Lowest common denominator here is going to be 2. We now combine those on the top. 8 plus 9 is going to be 17, and 4 minus 1 is going to be 3. So here we have a fraction above a fraction. What do we do now? We take 17 over 12. Remember what the sign means in a fraction. It means divided by. Divide by 3 over 2. Then what do we do? 17 over 12. We flip and multiply it. Can we simplify? We sure can. Giving me 17 over 18. Final answer. Not a big deal, I don't think. Maybe it looked worse than it actually was. So again, your steps are combine the fractions in the numerator if necessary, combine your fractions in the denominator if necessary, then divide the numerator by the denominator. When you're dividing fractions, you flip and multiply, then simplify at the end. Let's try the next one together. Lowest common denominator between 2 and 8 is going to be 8. Make that into an 8 by multiplying by 4 on the top and the bottom. The bottom fraction here, lowest common denominator is going to be 4. Combine those together now. 4 minus 3 is 1. And 3 minus 2 is 1. Now you don't have to make it such a thick line. I'm just trying to distinguish the fact that it's dividing the two together. 1 over 8 divided by 1 over 4. We flip and multiply. Take a 4 out. Couldn't be easier. That whole thing just equals 1/2. Try these on your own. We'll take them up. I'll take up D now. Complex fraction. Lowest common denominator between 5 and 2 is going to be 10. The bottom here now, lowest common denominator between 2 and 10 is going to be 10. So we multiply the bottom here by 5. Two minus 15 is going to be minus 13 over 10. 5 minus 1 is going to be 4 over 10. We will then write this as minus 13 over 10 divided by 4 over 10. What do we do next? We flip the fraction that comes after the division sign and we multiply. Look at that. See that? 10 and 10. Both gone. Final answer? Minus 13 over 4. Not quite the final answer. How many times does 4 go into 13? It goes in 3 times with remainder 1. And remember, this whole thing is negative. Negative 3 1/4. So that brings an end to the review of fractions in this course. Hopefully you have a strong foundation on this. As we get to conversions in our laboratory, it's really important you understand how to work with fractions, specifically how to cancel values out. Until next time.